welcome to another show. Today, we're going to compare two films that take place during the Vietnam War.
It's better to get it the first few weeks. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm so tired. I think I've made a big mistake coming here.
Private Pile, if there is one thing in this world that I hate, it is an unlocked footlocker. You know that, don't you? Sir, yes, sir.
The late 80s and the early 90s were replete with dozens of movies set in the Vietnam War. Missing an action series, Eye of the Eagle, Gardens of Stone, Hamburger Hill, Good Morning Vietnam, Off Limits, Part 2-1, Casualties of War, The Expendables, Born on the 4th of July, Air America, Bullet in the Head, and the list goes on. Today we're going to talk about two of those movies. The Vietnam War was a prolific subject in cinema, producing some of the most poignant and powerful films in the history of the medium. Two such films, Platoon and Full Metal Jacket, stand out not only for their critical acclaim, but also for the unique perspective they offer on the war. Directed by Oliver Stone and Stanley Kubrick, respectively, these films provide distinct narratives, cinematic techniques, and thematic explorations.
Oh, Charlie Sheen. Yes, he and I were standing there waiting for a lighting setup, and he was looking at the Filipino crew, and he goes, "You see those guys looking at me?" I went, "Yeah. Why are they staring at you?" He goes, "You know what? Well, I was here when I was a little kid. My dad did Apocalypse, and I think those guys were in the crew." I went, "Yeah, that must be it." I said, "My dad was here too." He goes, "What movie was he in?" I went, "Charlie, it was The Real War."
In this comparative analysis, we will delve into the intricacies of both films, examining their approach to storytelling, character development, and the portrayal of war. Oliver Stone's Platoon, released in 1986, is often praised for its raw and immersive depiction of the Vietnam War. As a Vietnam War veteran himself, Stone brings a personal touch to the film, infusing it with an authenticity and emotional depth. The film follows Chris Taylor, a young soldier who volunteers for duty and quickly finds himself engulfed in the brutal realities of war. Through Taylor's eyes, Stone explores themes of innocence lost, the moral ambiguity of war, and the psychological toll on soldiers. Stone's direction is characterized by gritty realism. He utilizes handheld cameras and natural lighting to create an almost documentary-like feel. The combat scenes are visceral and chaotic, reflecting the disorienting nature of warfare. Stone's personal experiences in Vietnam are evident in the film's attention to detail, from the depiction of jungle combat to the interaction between soldiers. According to Oliver Stone, he intentionally cast Tom Berenger and Willem Dafoe against type. Berenger was mostly famous for playing good guys, while Dafoe had primarily played villains up until then. Both men received Oscar nominations for their work. The Vietnamese child that Kevin Dillon and Charlie Sheen torment had cataracts, but his family was too poor to pay for the treatment. Reportedly, Dillon and Sheen felt so bad about it they pooled money together so that boy could have surgery. Oliver Stone wrote the script's first draft in 1971 and sent it to Jim Morrison in hopes he would play the part Charlie Sheen ultimately played. Did you know that Morrison had the script on him when he was found dead in Paris? Before shooting commenced, all of the actors had to undergo an intensive 2-week basic training in the Philippines under the supervision of military advisor Dale Dye. Oliver Stone's intention was not to have the men bond and act as one unit, but to deprive them of sleep and make them utterly exhausted so that they would be burned out and therefore in character. Director Oliver Stone was very rough and abusive in his treatment of the actors during filming. According to John C. McGinley, everyone hated Stone the entire duration of the shoot. This was Stone's specific aim, in order to expose the cast to something resembling the horrors of war and get the most realistic performances. Most cast and crew members agree that Stone's behavior sometimes bordered on psychotic, from a combination of sleep deprivation, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the intensity of the shoot itself. The editor claimed that one day Stone yelled at him for taking away footage of a scene that they hadn't even shot yet. Johnny Depp recalled that during one particular stressful scene, he was so intimidated by Stone's aggressive behavior that he came close to vomiting. Stone still insisted on a second take. The movie poster depicting Elias with his hands in the air is a recreation of a 1968 photograph by Art Greenspun. This photograph was recognized as the 13th greatest military photograph in a September 2000 issue of the Army-Navy AF Time. At one point, a character is warned not to drink from the river because he might get malaria. During filming, Willem Dafoe got thirsty and drank water from a river, not knowing that a dead pig was not far upstream. He became sick for 24 hours, but not with malaria, which is actually contracted from mosquito bites. All of the actors had to endure a harsh 14-day boot camp in the Philippines before the shooting of the film commenced. The actors were given military haircuts, were required to stay in character throughout the camp, ate only military rations, were not allowed to shower or use toilets. They had to carry real weight, slept in the jungle, and even had rotations for night watch. Military advisor Dale Dye also simulated several combat situations to teach the actors how to respond under intense stress, and had many conversations with the cast about PTSS and the sensation of being shot. The movie is narrated by Charlie Sheen, eerily echoing his father Martin Sheen's narration of Apocalypse Now in 1979, also filmed extensively in the Philippines. Oliver Stone at one point wanted Mickey Rourke for Sergeant Barnes and Nick Nolte as the experienced Sergeant Elias. Both were offered the parts, and both turned them down. Denzel Washington lobbied for the role of Sergeant Elias.
Yeah, he existed. It's in the book.
Yeah.
It's based on a guy called Sergeant. Well, I called him Sergeant Barnes, but I wouldn't use his real name. Real guy, getting shot in the face, and was scarred, distorted, kind of handsome like that. But he was a serious guy, and he knew what he was doing. He was the leader of the platoon. See, I made clear that the leaders of the platoon were not really the lieutenants. They were the platoon sergeant and the squad sergeants.
Keanu Reeves and John Cusack both turned down the part of Chris Taylor. A young Ben Stiller auditioned for a part in the movie, but reportedly director Oliver Stone immediately rejected him before Stiller could even read his lines because he found him cute.
Hi, I'm Oliver Stone, and this summer I invite you to witness my latest creation.
Stiller would later lampoon Stone in a segment of the Ben Stiller show called Oliver Stone Land, and the infatuation with Vietnam-based movies of the late 80s and 90s itself in Tropic Thunder from 2008.
This is my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, this is for fun. This is my rifle, this is my gun.
Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, released in 1987, offers a different take on the Vietnam War. Known for his meticulous and stylized approach, Kubrick divides the film into two distinct halves. The first half focuses on the dehumanizing effects of basic training at Paris Island, where recruits are subject to the harsh disciplines of Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. The second half shifts to Vietnam itself, following the experiences of Private Joker and his fellow Marines during the Tet Offensive. Kubrick's direction is marked by his signature visual precision and dark humor. He employs symmetrical composition and stark lighting to create a sense of detachment and unease. The boot camp sequences are almost clinical in their portrayal of the psychological manipulation and brutality inflicted on recruits. In contrast, the Vietnam sequences are more chaotic and fragmented, highlighted by the absurdity of horror and war. Director Stanley Kubrick had nothing but praise for R. Lee Ermey's skill as a performer. Kubrick originally was going to write dialogue for Ermey's character himself, but he became so impressed with what Ermey improvised, he decided it was not necessary. He simply let him ad-lib, an act practically unheard of for a Stanley Kubrick film. Ermey's performances were so faultless that Kubrick only needed 2 to 3 takes to get his scenes filmed, which was also extremely rare for a Kubrick film. The only instance Ermey had to film more than 2 to 3 scenes was the jelly donut scene, which he claimed was filmed in 37 takes, to the point his voice kept disappearing from time to time. To make Gunnery Sergeant Hartman's performance and the recruits' reactions as convincing as possible, Matthew Modine, Vincent D'Onofrio, and the other actors playing recruits never met R. Lee Ermey prior to filming. Stanley Kubrick also saw to it that Ermey didn't fraternize with the actors between takes. Vincent D'Onofrio gained 70 pounds for his role as Private Pyle. That broke Robert De Niro's movie weight gain record of 60 pounds for Raging Bull in 1980. This record still stands as of 2020. It took him 7 months to put the weight on, and 9 months to take it off with physical training. He noted that his new look scared off women, and people would often repeat things to him, thinking that he was mentally challenged. In his memoir, Matthew Modine recalled a day when he asked Stanley Kubrick's permission to leave the set because his pregnant wife was scheduled to have a C-section and he didn't have scenes planned for that day. Kubrick didn't want him to leave the set, claiming that he would just pass out from blood and get in the way of the doctors. It wasn't until Modine threatened to cut his own hand in order to get to the hospital that Kubrick relented and allowed him to leave, but he made him promise to come back immediately after it's done. Vincent D'Onofrio heard of the auditions for the film from Matthew Modine. Using a rented video camera and dressed in army fatigues, he recorded his audition for the part of Private Pyle.
And one day I was working as a doorman at the Hard Rock Cafe on 57th Street many years ago, and in the city. And he passed by with his wife, and he saw me, and he came over, and we started talking. And he said, "I'm in England. I'm doing this movie with Stanley Kubrick." I'm like, I made a tape, and I sent it out, and then I ended up sending another one. They asked for another one, and then Stanley spoke to me and gave me some words to send out, and I sent those out. And the next thing you know, he says, so you'd have to gain like some weight to come out to play this part, or would you be into doing that? And De Niro had just done it for Raging Bull, and I'm like, of course, De Niro can do it. I can do it. Do you know what you're going to do tomorrow? And I'm like, I think I do. Yes, I do. And he goes, okay. And I'm waiting, and he says, it has to be big. It has to be like Lon Chaney big. And most of them were Lon Chaney, and I'd been studying for that scene. And it was like God came down and gave me the biggest Christmas gift ever.
D'Onofrio later said that he owes his career to Kubrick casting him in the film. Back to Denzel Washington again, he was considered for the role of 8-Ball, but he declined because he couldn't read the script before auditioning. He has since said that it is a role that he regrets missing out on. That makes 2 Vietnam War movies that Denzel Washington wanted but didn't get. Director Stanley Kubrick asked Michael Herr for help in making a Vietnam War movie. Since Herr had written the narration for Apocalypse Now, Kubrick and Herr became close friends over time when Kubrick shared his intention to adapt the novel The Short Timers by Gustav Hasford. Herr agreed and helped write much of the screenplay, particularly the parts set in Vietnam. His contributions to the script were based largely on his own nonfiction novel, Dispatches, which details his own experiences as a reporter covering the war. Like Joker and Raffleman, Herr was essentially freelance and allowed to travel anywhere in the country. And the scene where Joker and Rafterman watch the crazed gunner in the chopper machine gun civilians is taken directly from that novel. Stanley Kubrick had extensive phone conversations with writer Gustav Hasford over the screenplay to discuss the adaptation of his novel into a movie. He eventually wanted to meet with Hasford in person, even though co-screenwriter Michael Herr tried to talk Kubrick out of this, as he thought Hasford was a scary man. The meeting took place at Kubrick's house, but it went so badly that Hasford was kept out of the writing process for the remainder of production. Hasford later considered legal action to obtain a full writing credit on the screenplay.
I want the third team up this road here. First and second fire team behind me up this other road, okay? Right. Okay. Let's go! Let's get it done!
Platoon excels in its complex character development, presenting a diverse array of soldiers with varying motivations and moral compasses. Chris Taylor, portrayed by Charlie Sheen, is the film's central character and serves as the audience's surrogate. His journey from an idealistic volunteer to a battle-hardened survivor is compelling and heart-wrenching. The film also features memorable characters such as the righteous Sergeant Elias, played by Willem Dafoe, and the ruthless Sergeant Barnes, played by Tom Berenger, whose conflicting ideologies drive much of the film's tension. The interactions between these characters reveal the complexities of camaraderie and conflict within the platoon. Stone delves into the psychological struggles of each soldier, highlighting their coping mechanisms, fears, and moral dilemmas. This rich characterization adds depth to the narrative, making the audience invested in the fate of each character. In Full Metal Jacket, character development is approached differently. The first half of the film focuses on the transformation of the recruits, particularly Private Leonard Gomer Pyle Lawrence, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, and Private Joker, played by Matthew Modine. Pyle's journey from an inept recruit to a broken and dangerous individual is a tragic depiction of the dehumanizing effects of military training. Joker, on the other hand, maintains a sense of irony and skepticism, which serves as a counterpoint to the blind obedience demanded by the military. The second half of the film shifts attention to Joker's experiences in Vietnam, where his moral complexity is further explored. Kubrick's characters are often seen as archetypes rather than fully fleshed individuals, serving to illustrate broader themes about the nature of war and humanity. This approach, while less intimate than Stone's, allows Kubrick to dissect the psychological and philosophical aspects of warfare with clinical detachment. Platoon is rich with themes that explore the human condition in the context of war. One of the central themes is the loss of innocence. Chris Taylor's initial idealism is shattered as he witnesses and participates in the horrors of combat. The film also examines the duality of man, epitomized by the conflict between Sergeant Elias and Sergeant Barnes. Elias represents compassion and moral integrity, while Barnes embodies brutality and moral corruption. This dichotomy reflects the internal struggle faced by soldiers in a morally ambiguous environment. Another significant theme is the brotherhood among soldiers. Despite the conflicts and differences, the platoon members share a bond forged in the crucible of war. Stone portrays the camaraderie, loyalty, and sacrifice that define the soldiers' relationships, highlighting the strength and resilience of the human spirit. Full Metal Jacket delves into the dehumanizing effects of war and the loss of individuality. The boot camp sequences illustrate how the military strips recruits of their identities, reducing them to mere instruments of war. The transformation of Private Pyle is a stark example of how this dehumanization can lead to psychological breakdown. The film also explores the theme of absurdity, particularly in the Vietnam sequences, where the chaotic and surreal nature of combat is emphasized. Kubrick's film questions the morality of war and the concept of heroism. Joker's journey reflects the internal conflict between his role as a soldier and his innate sense of humanity. The film's iconic ending, with soldiers singing the Mickey Mouse Club theme song amidst the devastation, underscores the absurdity and futility of war. Both Platoon and Full Metal Jacket are seminal works that offer profound insights into the Vietnam War and its impact on soldiers. While Platoon is grounded in Oliver Stone's personal experiences and emphasizes emotional realism, Full Metal Jacket is characterized by Stanley Kubrick's detached and stylized approach, focusing on the psychological and philosophical dimensions of warfare. Together, these films provide a comprehensive and multifaceted portrayal of one of the most contentious and transformative conflicts in modern history. That was our show for today. What do you think? Did you prefer one movie over the other? Did you like both? Did you prefer another Vietnam era based movie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And while you're at it, I'd be honored if you subscribe to my channel, click the little bell to stay informed, and check out my Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise also in the comments section. Until next time, this is Kevin Given saying, live long and prosper, may the force be with you, and keep reaching for the stars.